There are expensive motorcycles, there are exclusive motorcycles, and then there's this. The Honda RC213V-S was never sold as a superbike. It was sold as an idea, a promise, the ultimate fantasy for riders who grew up watching MotoGP. A race bike, with lights, with a license plate, and the golden wing whispering in your ear. This is the closest you'll ever get to an RC213V. Sounds perfect, almost too perfect, because once you clear away the marketing smoke, one question remains, the one that actually matters. Was it a civilized MotoGP machine, or a museum piece dressed up as something usable? Let's start with the uncomfortable fact. In its European road legal version, this thing claimed 159 horsepower. Yes, not in 2005, not in the 90s, right in the era when mainstream superbikes were already pushing well past 200, and Honda wanted close to 188,000 euros. Here's the narrative trick behind this bike. Because the RC213V-S works brilliantly as a myth, but much less well as a comparison. Put it next to a BMW S1000RR from the same era. Put it next to a Panigale. Put it next to almost any serious superbike in terms of power per euro, and the story starts to crack. Now, it would be unfair to reduce this motorcycle to a horsepower number, because then you'd miss what Honda was actually trying to do. And you'd miss why it still fascinates people 11 years later. The chassis was a declaration of war, an aluminum frame built with obsessive precision, an extremely long swing arm, geometry designed around MotoGP logic, not catalog logic, HRC logic, carbon fiber everywhere, machining at surgical levels, components that don't look chosen by cost, they look chosen by pride. And that changes the conversation. Because this isn't just an expensive Fireblade. This is a motorcycle built as if Honda wanted to prove something, not to the customer, to the industry. The problem is that just when you start falling in love with the idea, you reach the most delicate part, the engine. That 90-degree V4, 999 cubic centimeters, gear-driven camshafts, an architecture that, on paper, should make any enthusiast drool. But Honda didn't give you the full RC213V, and that needs to be said clearly. To homologate it, two key pieces of the story disappeared. No pneumatic valves, conventional springs instead. No seamless gearbox, a traditional transmission instead. A very good one, yes, but not revolutionary. And here lies the central crack in the story. Honda sold you proximity to MotoGP, but it softened the very elements that make a MotoGP machine special. Not out of malice, not out of incompetence, out of reality, out of usability, maintenance, homologation. Technically, that makes sense. What's harder to defend is the price. Because accepting compromises is one thing. Paying masterpiece money for an experience that arrived factory trimmed is something else entirely. The RC213V-S wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. And the difference between those two things costs quite a few zeros. Block 2, 11 labs. So Honda did the most Honda thing possible. They admitted it, without quite saying it out loud. And then came the famous sports kit, the key that unlocked the motorcycle many buyers thought they had purchased from the beginning. With that kit, everything changed. Power climbed to 215 horsepower. Weight dropped to around 160 kilos dry. The engine finally breathed freely. The electronics took on a sharper character. And at last, the RC213V-S stopped feeling like a restrained relic and started smelling like a real racetrack machine. But here comes the fine irony, the detail that makes this story great and slightly uncomfortable. To get the RC213V-S that justified its legend, you had to turn it into a motorcycle that wasn't road legal. In other words, the MotoGP for the street became closer to MotoGP, precisely when it stopped being for the street. And that detail changes everything, because it reshapes the verdict. This bike can't be analyzed purely as a machine. It has to be understood as a message. And what was the message? Very simple. Honda didn't want to sell you the most logical motorcycle, not the fastest per euro, not the most sensible. They wanted to sell you access. Access to an idea. Access to HRC. Access to an industrial rarity that would make absolutely no sense in an Excel spreadsheet. And in that sense, they succeeded. The RC213V-S still has something many brutally fast motorcycles will never have: aura. Now comes the uncomfortable moment, the one that separates the collector from the rider. Is it a masterpiece? Yes, without question. As an engineering exercise, as a technical showcase, as an object of desire, it's extraordinary. Is it the ultimate motorcycle for someone who lives motorcycling through their body? That's where the music changes. Because a bike designed not to crash, not to break, not to accumulate miles, not to lose value, starts to look dangerously like an investment. And an investment can be many things, but it's rarely a memorable motorcycle. The bikes that leave a mark usually ask something from you in return. They tire you, they challenge you, they contradict you, they force you to understand them. The RC213V-S, in too many cases, ended up becoming the opposite: a totem, a capsule, a frozen artifact. And for a machine born from the paddock, there's something almost elegantly tragic about that. So my verdict isn't yes or no. It's worse, and far more interesting. The Honda RC213V-S is a technical marvel, and at the same time a perfect symbol of how the industry can turn a rider's fantasy into something almost untouchable. It's not a scam. That would be too simple. It's something more sophisticated, an industrial masterpiece with the soul of a display case. And now it's your turn. I want real opinions, no posturing, no brand catechisms. Is the RC213V-S the absolute peak of modern motorcycling? Or the exact moment when passion quietly gave way to luxury dressed as heroism? I'll read you in the comments. This is Countersteer theory, throttle, and judgment.